Good afternoon to our Professor Dr. Josephine Baguio and to my fellow classmates. Good afternoon. This afternoon, we will discuss Module 5, Design, Methods, and Materials. So it says here that architecture is an art form that reflects how we present ourselves across the Earth's landscape, and like other expressive mediums, it changes with styles, technologies, and cultural adaptations. Architectures not only provides worldly needs of shelter, workspace, and storage, but also represents human ideals in buildings like courthouses and government buildings, and manifestations of the spirits in churches and cathedrals. Traditional architecture has survived over thousands of years in one form or another, with contemporary design offers new approaches in how we use materials and technology to shape and look to our environment. Now let's begin. Let's discuss early developments in building, design, and techniques method. The basic methods of building, design, and construction have been used for thousands of years. Stacking stones, laying brick, or lashing wood together in one form or another are still used today in all parts of the world. But over the centuries, innovations in methods and materials have given new expression to architecture and the human footprints on the landscape. We can look to historical examples for clues that give context to different style periods. So here it is. First, we have here Catalhuyuk. So in Western culture, one of the earliest settlements with permanent structures was discovered at Catalhuyuk in Turkey. So the rich soil that surrounds the settlements indicates the inhabitants relied in part on farming, dated to about 7,500 BCE. The dwellings are constructed from dried mud and brick and show wooden support beam spanning the ceilings. The design of the settlement incorporates a cell-like structure of small buildings either sharing common walls or separated by a few feet. The roofs are flat and were used as pathways between buildings. The next image is the Stonehenge. This is a significant advance came with the development of the post and lintel system. With this, a system of posts, either stone or wood, are placed at intervals and spanned by beams at the tops. The load is distributed down the post to allow for areas of open space between them. Its earliest use is seen at Stonehenge, a prehistoric monument in southern England dating to about 3000 BCE or before the Common Era. So next we have colonnade. A colonnade continues the post and lintel methods as a series of columns and beams enveloping larger areas of space. Colonnades can be freestanding or part of the larger structure. So common in Egyptian, Greek, and also Roman architectural design. So their use creates visual rhythm and implies a sense of grandeur. Over the time, columns become categorized by the capital style of their tops. So the smooth and unadorned Tuscan and fluted Doric columns give way to more elaborate styles, the scrolled Ionian and the high relief Corinthian. So next image is the Parthenon. The Parthenon, a Greek temple to the mythic goddess Athena, was built in the 5th century BCE in Athens and is part of a larger community of structure in the Acropolis. So all the considered pinnacles of the classic Greek architecture, Ionic colonnades march across all sides of the Pantheon, the outer boundary of a very ordered interior floor plan. The next example is the colonnade surrounding at St. Peter's Square in the Vatican Rome. The colonnade is part of our contemporary surroundings too. Parks and other public spaces use them to the same effect, providing visual and material stability in spanning areas of open space. So next we have here a Roman aqueducts are another example of how effective the arc was used. Tall and graceful, the arches support themselves in a colonnade and were used to transport the network of water channels throughout the ancient Rome. From arc came two more important developments. Extending an arc in a linear direction formed a vault, encapsulating tall, narrow spaces with inverted U-shape ceilings, and the compressive force of the vault required thick walls on each side to keep it from collapsing. Because these main vaults were situated underground, essentially tunnels, connecting areas of a larger building or providing covered transport of people, goods, and materials throughout the city. Next slide, we have an arc rotated on its vertical axis creates a dome, with its curving organic scoop of space reserved for the tops of the most important buildings. So this is the Pantheon in Rome, sports of dome with an oculus, a round or elliptical opening at the top that is the massive building's only light source. These elements combine to revolutionize architectural design throughout European and the Middle East in form of a bigger and stronger churches, mosques, or even sectarian governments buildings. Okay, another example is the flying Batteries became a kind of exoskeleton that transferred the heavy weights of Romanesque stone roofs through their arcs and into the ground, away from the building. They became catalyst for the Gothic style based on higher, thinner walls, pointed arcs, rib vaults, and spired towers. Also, the thinner walls of the Gothic style allowed for more stained glass windows and interior illumination. Another example is the Saint Denis Basilica in France. Is one of the first Gothic style church known for its high vaulted ceilings and extensive use of stained glass windows. The architecture of the church became a symbol of spirituality itself. Soaring heights, magnificently embellished interiors and exteriors, elaborate lighting, and sheer grandeur on a massive scale. Also, we have here the Doge Palace in Venice, Italy, housed the political aristocracy of the Republic of Venice for 1,000 years. Built in 1309 CE, its rhythmic levels of columns and pointed arcs divided by fractals as they rise, give way to elaborate geometric patterns in the pink brick facade. The ornamental additions at the top edge reinforce the patterns as we have seen here in the photo. Next, let's discuss architecture in China and the Far East. Chinese architecture refers to a style of architecture that has taken shape in East Asia over many centuries. The structural principles of traditional Chinese architecture have remained largely unchanged. Chinese architectural and aesthetic design is based on symmetry, a general emphasis on the horizontal and site layouts that reflects a hierarchy or importance. These considerations results in formal and stylistic differences in comparison to the West and display alternatives in design. The Chinese have used stone, brick, and wood for centuries. So as we can see here, the example is the Great Wall of China. It began in the 5th century BCE, was intended to keep nomadic invaders out of northern China. The stone wall covers 5,500 miles in its entirety. The rigid materials takes on a more flexible appearance as it conforms to the contours of the landscape surrounding it. Next, we have cross-cultural influences. As overland, the marine trade routes expanded between Eastern and Western civilization, so did the influence of cultural styles in architecture, religion, and commerce. The most important of these passages was the Silk Road, a system of roads that developed over hundreds of years across the European and Asian continents. Along this road are buildings that show cross-cultural influences in their design. The example is the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, offers different cultural influences manifest in one building, a classic Greek colonnade at the main entrance and the gold dome and central torrent supporting it, Western style arcs and colorful Islamic surface embellishment. Next, we have the Industrial Revolution. So beginning in the 18th century, Industrial Revolution made fundamental changes in agriculture, manufacturing, transportation, and housing. So architecture changed in response to the new industrial landscape. Prior to the late 19th century, the weight of the multi-story building had to be supported principally by the strength of its walls. So the taller the building, the more strain displaced on the lower sections, since there were clear engineering limits to the weight such load-bearing walls could sustain. Large design meant massively thick walls on the ground floors and definite limits on the building's height. The example of the Industrial Revolution is the Eiffel Tower. Forged iron and milled steel began to replace wood, brick, and stone as primary materials for large buildings. So these changes is encapsulated in the Eiffel Tower, built in 1889. Standing one four huge arc legs, the iron lattice tower rises narrowly to just over 1,000 feet high. The Eiffel Tower not only became an icon for France, but for industry itself. Heralding a new age in materials, design, and construction methods. Also, steel framing was set into foundations of reinforced concrete poured around a grid of steel rods or other matrices to increase tensile strength in foundations, columns, and vertical slabs. Next, we have here modernist architecture. The move to modernism was introduced with the opening of the Bauhaus School in Weimar, Germany, founded in 1919 by the German architect Walter Gropius. Bauhaus was teaching and learning center of modern industrial and architectural design. Its modern form includes bold lines and asymmetric balance and curtain walls of glass. It's painted in neutral tones of white and gray, accented by strong primary colors on selected doors. Okay, another example, please take a look for the first image, the falling water design. It is by Frank Lloyd Wright, is considered one of the 20th century's greatest architects. So Wright designed buildings, churches, homes, and schools, but it is best known for his design of falling water, a home in the Pennsylvania countryside for Chicago department store owner Edgar Kaufman. So his design innovations include unified open floor plans, a balance of traditional and modern materials, and the use of cantilevered forms that extends horizontal balance. So the second image is also an example of modernist architecture. So this is a Guggenheim Museum in New York City. It's an example of Ritz concerned with organic forms and utilization of space. The main elements in the design is the spiral form rising from the middle of the cantilevered main structure. So the paintings are exhibited on its curved walls. Visitors take the elevator to the top floor and view the works as they travel down and gently slope hallway. So this spiral surrounds a large atrium in the middle of the building and dome skylights at the top. So next we have here postmodern and contemporary architecture. So postmodern architecture began as an international style whose first example are generally cited as being from the 1950s but did not become a movement until the late 1970s and continues to influence present day architecture. So, postmodernity in architecture is generally thought to be heralded by the return of wit, ornament, and reference to architecture in response to the formalism of the international style. I have prepared one example for the postmodern contemporary architecture, the Michael Graves Portland Building from 1982 personifies the idea behind postmodernist thought. A reference to a more traditional styles is evident in the patterned column-like section. So over large-scale decorative elements are built into and onto the exterior walls, and contrast between materials, colors, and forms give the building a graphic sense of visual width. Lastly, we have green architecture. In the last decade, there has emerged a strong interest in developing green architecture. Designs that incorporate ecologically and environmentally sustainable practices in site preparation, materials, energy use, and waste systems. Some are simple buildings oriented to the south or west, helps with passive solar heating. So other are more complex solar voltaic cells on the roof to generate power to the building. Green roofs are made of sod and other organic materials and act as a cooling agent and recycle rainwater too. In addition, technologically, innovations in lighting, heating, and cooling system have made them more efficient, as what we can see in the image, right? So look at the image. It's a very colorful and a branch of. So this is an example. This is a branch of a Seattle Public Library uses green design. So there is a glass curtain in their wall on the north side makes use of natural lighting. So overhanging wooden roof beams shades harsh light. The whole structures is nestled under a green roof of sod and over 18,000 low water use plants. 7 skylights on the roofs provide more natural lighting. So this is wonderful innovation. So that's the end of my report. Thank you for listening. Once again, this is Maria Gloria Sumampong. God bless us all.